Hey, and welcome back to Thriving Within, where we as impact makers are moving from layers of survival to thriving, creating and experiencing more pleasure, more joy, more abundance. And in this place, we'll explore life, different ways of being, and receive gentle facilitation of thriving in your body, in your life, and in your work for your soul's most pleasurable experience. Before we get into today's topic, today is episode 4 as well. Episode 4, it's power as a birthright. In the name of soul embodiment and coherence with the version of you who is creating what you most desire to experience, I want to invite you to turn on possibilities. It's a 3-day workshop across a couple of weeks. Day 1 and day 2 are going to be on spring equinox and the new moon in March 20th, March 21st. We will gather resources, come together to embody the version of you who has the thing and is creating from their authentic co-creative power what do you want to experience. We'll plant a seed of your dreams. And then day 2 will come together and notice where you are now, what needs get to be met, what boundaries get to be repaired, and what would that somatically feel like to do. And then we'll have a couple of weeks for integration. And then on the full moon, we will come back together and do some bodywork practices of either release or deepening into embodiment. I hope to see you there. And then last piece is there's a workbook for this podcast. If you're interested in taking this information a little bit deeper, free workbook on my website, selenaCole.com/free. All right, let's get to it. So before we go a little bit further, you might notice your hips on whatever seat you are. I've gotten recent word that people listen to this while driving, and so the practices of looking around, not the most attuned. So you might just notice the hips in the seat that you're in. Do you have awareness of your hips? Could you draw your attention down to the hips? And just being there for a moment. And while you're noticing your hips, you might also notice your breath. Is it at a pace that feels nourishing? That feels attuned to presence? Maybe you are going somewhere, but where you are right now, you have no place else to be. You might be in the path of going, but you probably are exactly where you're supposed to be. Can you be present with that? I am where I am supposed to be. And maybe you notice the gravity holding you gently and lovingly where you're supposed to be. What's this like for you? And from here, we might attune to our last podcast around wellness as a birthright. Where we're going to start today is noticing the quote by Gary Zukav, when the personality comes to fully serve the energy of the soul, that is authentic power. Authentic power is the topic of today, and noting that authentic power is your birthright. We are born into this world connected to ourselves, connected to spirit, connected to nature, connected to our family of origin, and connected to the ability to resource energy and power from all of those places. And that reminds me of a quote from Audre Lorde, the thing that inspired my beginning to embody my authentic power in her essay, Uses of the Erotic. The first couple of paragraphs I'm going to read to you. So Audre Lorde says there are many kinds of power, used and unused, acknowledged or otherwise. The erotic is a resource within each of us that lies in a deeply female and spiritual plane. It's firmly rooted in the power of our unexpressed or unrecognized feeling. in order to perpetuate itself. Every oppression must corrupt or distort those various sources of power within the culture of the oppressed that can provide energy for change. For women, this has meant a suppression of the erotic as a considered source of power and information within our lives. We have been taught to suspect this resource, vilified, abused, and devalued within the Western society. And on the one hand, the superficially erotic has been encouraged as a sign of female inferiority. And then on the other hand, women have been made to suffer and to both feel contemptible and suspect by very virtue of its experience. It is a short step from there to the false belief that only the suppression of the erotic within our lives and the consciousness can women be truly strong. But that strength is illusory, for it's fashioned within the context of male models of power. And as women, we have come to distrust the power which arises from our deepest and non-rational knowledge. We have been warned against it all of our lives by the male world, which values the depth of feeling enough to keep women around in order to exercise in service of them, but which fears the same depth too much to examine the possibilities of it within themselves. So women are maintained at a distant and inferior position to be physically milked. Much the same way ants maintain colonies of aphids to provide a life-giving substance for their masters. But the erotic offers a well of replenishing and provocative force to the woman who does not fear its revelation, nor succumb to the belief that sensation is enough. The erotic has been misnamed by men and used against women. And it has been made into the confused, the trivial, the psychotic, and the plasticized sensation. For this reason, we have often turned away from the exploration and the consideration of the erotic as a source of power. End quote. And I will note that she uses terms male, female, she, they, he, and I will name that I'm in deep belief that we all have erotic power within our bodies, and more than just the sexual, the sensual, including all of our senses, all of our ability to sense and perceive. And so this is not to deepen into gender narratives and gender binary conformity. I use this as a understanding of what's in all of us. Whatever space you occupy, even if it's all of the spaces on the gender non-binary, you are included in my perception of this, my understanding. And I would venture to say, because of who Audre Lorde is, probably hers as well. So the erotic as power is not what I grew up as understanding of power. The erotic talks about authentic power. I grew up in an understanding of colonized power. Power based in the perception of my worthiness. My worthiness based on what I had achieved, what I could perform, what I could do, how I could give, the pleasure that I would give, both by image, opinion, voice, caretaking, the power of worthiness rooted in my beauty, rooted in my thinness, and also the shameful and potentially dangerous power of my sensuality and my sexuality. And here I'm thinking about teenage or preteen girls who can't show bra straps, the dangerous power of seeing undergarments. Oh no. I aimed as a young one for these powers in achievement via intellect and performance and beauty. And I fixed and I tinkered with my body, with my opinions, with my ability to regurgitate information on cue. and my expression of myself. And I made myself smaller and smaller and smaller and more performative until I lost a sense of my true self. By the age of 13, 14, I was dieting. By the age of 16, I was on the honor roll, getting great grades, also in disordered eating and disordered exercise territory. And those two things were a path that continued on for years. I would say my disordered eating and disordered exercise peaked around 2017. So that was 28, 27. It was about a decade that I was in performance, in the depths of performance, pleasing, achievement, thinness, wavering back and forth. And so around 2017, 2018, I really landed with a question of like, I was profoundly disassociated, anxious, depressed, not feeling a sense of who I was, and unhappy. I was doing all of these things and they never led to more pleasure, more satisfaction, more fulfillment. And so I began to ask, who am I without thinness, without giving, without pleasing, without my value, my perceived value to someone else? Who am I? And thus began my journey of deepening into the question that I then paired with my learnings in sociology of like, okay, actually, who am I and where is my power without the white male gaze? Naming the white male gaze deeply, deeply values intellect, rationale, Western ideals of beauty and thinness rooted in deep, deep racism and deep, deep detachment to the female's natural biology, to that innate knowing of what the body gets to and has to do in order to co-create life within ourselves and with outside of ourselves, right? Our natural paths and cycle. And so my question, without the power that I could wield from thinness, from having or not having money, both of these can give a certain sort of power in our system. Without the power from beauty, from education, from people-pleasing, perfectionism, performing, being the perfect caregiver who would go beyond her limits to serve someone else's dream, multiple someone else's dream. Without those patterns, without that power, who am I? What was my power? And you might ask yourself the same question. I began the questionings of, what is it? What is this power? Where is it? What is the source? And it was Audre Lorde's essay that gave me a palpable sensation of what it is, where it is, and what it could be sourced. And then it was my learnings in body work from Rachel Maddox, Now Chemical Alignment, that brought me into connection, tangible feeling of that power. And through all of the practices that I have learned, facilitated, and experienced, somewhere along the line in meditation with the Divine Feminine, I received the question to my answer. The source of that power is all around you. It is felt and channeled through the body. My body is the vessel for the power of my soul, and my nervous system and my soul together source the power from everything else. So it's not just my power and not just a performance of my ability to maybe get little doses of power and resources. It's the energy that is all around. And so the work gets to be becoming the manager, the facilitator of that ebb and flow of energy and power into me and out of me. into me from what feels beneficial, helpful, regenerative, replenishing, nourishing, and out of me, and out of me, what I want to give, how I want to impact the world, how I want to care in a way that feels like it's coming from an overflowing cup and also so deliciously connected and fulfilling to give. Not extractive, but co-creative. Because it's pleasurable for me to sit in the role of being a vessel of power that can meet somebody's need to be held, to be honored, to be celebrated, to be witnessed, to be loved. We might explore the territory of colonized power versus authentic power. And we might create right relationship with external power because, as I named, power is all around us. So we are tapping into external power, but are we doing it from a colonized perspective and only tapping into power that has been colonized? Because in our society, we overvalue external society-based power and resources and undervalue inner power, undervalue power from nature, power from the stars, the planets, the moons, power from the divine. In all honesty, for most of us, if we are in the Christian religion or in many other religions, the power from the divine is also separated and hoarded and doled out based on worthiness. And I don't know about you, but that's not the sort of divine power that I can either trust or actually want to embody. I think that there is a different resource of divine power. I think I know, I feel, and I have experienced. And so an invitation for you to potentially play with the idea of that being true for you too. And then at some point we might play with the idea of assistance in you experiencing and embody that. Let's talk about colonized power. Colonized power is held in containers outside of us. Those containers stop the flow. It is a gatekeeping of resources. It stops the flow, and society gatekeeps and contains access to resources and the power to make change, contains it outside of us. Via structures, institutions, concepts, commerce, hierarchical status, and dominating authority. Those are the things that have the power, and we are inconsistent trying to get little bits of power, little bits of resources so for us to be sustained. And we can take this idea of resources from the commerce that is held in different, with different institutions and doled out systematically in little tiny portions for us to dole out in little tiny portions to get met with food, to get met with shelter, to get met with experiences of pleasure and connection and joy. That's what I mean by gatekeeping. And so because it's contained outside of us and doled out, it's doled out based on worthiness or perception of worthiness. Perception is actually the middle, the anchor or the conduit between us and external power. And so perception based on worthiness, based on other people's acceptance of us, based on conditional belonging, which is why we all have wounds around worthiness and acceptance and belonging. And in colonized power, there's an overvaluing of external and an undervaluing of internal power. And systems of oppression have socialized us to turn off our connection to resources from the spiritual, from the internal, from nature, turned it off and separated, and forced us on using our physical bodies and labor and our mind's labor and our emotional labor to get physical, mental, and some emotional needs met. That's from a place of being under-resourced. And so we are led to believe that we only have the power that is within our physical body, within our emotional body, within our nervous system, and within our mind. And only certain powers of the mind are valuable. And it is completely based on how other people perceive our bodies, how other people perceive our minds, how other people perceive our emotions. Thus, there are only certain thoughts that are valuable, only certain physical actions that are valuable, only certain emotions that are valuable, and thus worthy of being resourced by love and all other sustaining energy, including physical energy of sustenance for food. We are also within colonized power, disconnected from community and disconnected from our innate worthiness to receive love and to receive care, and our innate worthiness to give love and to give care. Something that I notice with my clients who have worthiness wounds is their ability to love is wounded because there is not a knowing. They have been, their sense of knowing of the value, the depth, the power, the beauty and the appreciation, the connection of their love is wounded. And so the flow of love in and out is suffocated. And I'm in the perception that it gets to be an abundant and potent flow. That's what we are all worthy of experiencing. And we are also disconnected from the flow of energy, of power from nature, land, lineage, guidance that honors our authenticity, honors our innate worthiness, and disconnected from our right to safety within our differences, including our differences. So some aspects of colonized power is domination, scarcity, gatekeeping. Domination is power over versus power with. In authoritative dynamics where there's always a superior and the inferior is supposed to serve the superior, it's hierarchical. It's men over women, women serve men, whites over blacks, people of color, and it's like a totem pole, anti-blackness at the bottom, people of color in the middle, typically based on color and based on the stereotypes given by racist stereotypes and the power of those, the value of each of those different stereotypes within whiteness. Then there's also the authoritative of old over young. Old has the dominating power. And then rich over poor. Poor people are to serve the rich. This is domination. In actuality, we are all worthy of resources. We are all worthy of care. We are all worthy of being reciprocal and mutually supported in the flow of love, care, resources from in ourselves, out of ourselves, back and forth. Colonized power also is rooted in scarcity. The concept that there's less than enough to go around. And we're all vying to get as much external power along the terms of what the superior has deemed as acceptable. We're all trying to get, it's a concept of there's only enough money to go around. All of us are trying to, not all of us, many of us, some of us are trying to curate our perception, our external perception, to say, I am worthy of a lot of resources because of this, 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 and this. Because I'm beautiful, because I'm smart, because I can give love, because I'm really good at caretaking, because I'm really good at meeting needs. This is what makes me very, very worthy of getting these scarce resources. And when you think about it, when you maybe potentially even tune in, The scarce resources is rooted in fear. It's rooted in not enoughness. And we internalize that not enoughness and become extractive of our own power, extractive of our bodies, extractive of our minds, extractive of our sensuality in order to get what we can get. It's a sensation of both smallness, not enoughness, and graspy. And within that, sometimes what we do is A, become smaller, and B, maybe numb some of our needs. And the challenge in that is when we experience that scarcity and then we numb our needs because we don't feel like there's enough within us to get and enough to go around, we numb our needs, and that actually makes us more weak. Our power is undernourished because being met is what is energizing. Allowing the flow to go through us is what is energizing. And so when we don't have a connection to our needs, then there is no flow to that part of us, and thus we become weaker and weaker. We do not hone and use the power to co-create worlds and to the power to create change. And again, the scarcity is doled out, these scarce resources that we're told are scarce is doled out based on our worthiness. Worthiness, again, in perception of education. There's only enough education to go around. There is a lineage or a hierarchy within the types of education, and this leads to hyper academia and hyper logic. If you have enough education, if you show that you're smart enough, then maybe you can gather more and more and more of these scarce resources. Maybe then you can move from the poor to the rich. This is what keeps us in institutions that hold the power of knowledge. Even though we can read those books and put ourselves through courses without spending hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. In those institutions, they actually are utilizing our need for belonging and our need for some sort of achievement in order to gather and access resources. There's also a scarcity around desirability. There's only a certain image that is desirable, and it isn't thinness, it isn't pleasing, it isn't submissive. And only if you are deemed within that image, within the embodiment of that image, then are you desirable, and then you can get the scarce resources via somebody else. Typically in some lineage, typically from some male, either because there is a romantic connection or because there is an employment connection. And maybe your supervisor is a female, but at the top of it, it is typically white males that are deeming is your education, is your desirability, is your way of being worthy of resources. And then within, again, that scarcity, there's artificial dominance. Marginalized groups othering themselves, saying that I am actually the dominant one within this group. I am the best of this group so that I can move up in the hierarchy and have more resources. This is like crabs in a barrel concept, right? Othering to create power over another so that you can extract from the group, so you can extract from yourself, or so you can extract from one individual. Artificial dominance, because in actuality, no one is over anybody at all. We are all equals, but this colonized power has a narrative, has deep, deep rooted beliefs that go centuries and have actually been passed into the society from other societies that say certain groups are dominant, certain groups are more powerful, some groups are God-givenly more inherently worthy of all of the things. Factually untrue. And so within the scarcity, we have patterns of hyper growth. I have to be the best. I have to be the best, the fastest, the quickest, and over everybody else. It has a speed, it has an urgency, it has a destination that hyper focuses, that doesn't allow rest, doesn't allow care, doesn't allow love, doesn't allow pleasure, because growth is the purpose. And we will actually have another podcast around how pleasure can actually lead to growth. And then there's also heteronormativity. There's only one right way to love, and only one right way to love in a sexual way, in a romantic way. And then within that, male, female, only one right way. There's only a couple of right ways to be. You have to be dating, and then there has to be exclusivity, and then there should be like marriage before sex, even though nobody does that anymore. Or maybe some people do. I don't know. Maybe you do. If you do, much respect to you and your journey, right? But that's the ideal, and that the goal is marriage. Even though women are becoming increasingly, or maybe actually expressing their increasing displeasure within marriage, because the way that our marriages are set up are often very heavy on the emotional, mental, and physical labor of women. And so this heteronormativity is rooted in scarcity, but actually does not serve those who are locked in and not being nourished, pleasured, treated to the best of their worthiness. Within the scarcity is also neurotypicality. The idea that there's only one or a few right ways of thinking, what right ways to use the brain, that the brain should operate in a particular way. Also factually untrue, as we see by all the different ways that our brains think and operate and gather resources and gather information and facilitate that information. There's also body normativity. This is within the Western ideals of beauty, that thinness is the ideal. Right now, we've got like a curvy thinness. So they say the whole, Kate Moss era is coming back. I am adamantly against that. I think trends on body is weird. They're just weird. But we have body normativity as a thing within our society, and that body normativity is a way in which we undernourish ourselves in order to be within an ideal. It is a consistent shrinking. It's a consistent looking at and criticizing. Is the body that I exist in worthy of being met? Is it worthy of receiving love? Is it worthy of experiencing pleasure? Pleasure from food, pleasure from sex, pleasure from being touched and caressed all over. Or are there only certain parts of my body that are worthy of being seen, touched, caressed, because those are the only acceptable parts? We can just name how this body normativity actually detaches us from a worthiness to receive physical touch. This is an innate need. You can look at babies, they need to be touched all the time. This need calms a little bit as babies feel safer, but they still need to be touched. I, as a 34-year-old woman, still need to be touched. And I can notice the time in my relationship, in my development, where I thought that I wasn't worthy, or I wasn't comfortable, I think, due to worthiness, in being touched in certain areas, based on my size, based on perception, based on when I was in the depths of a disordered eating hypo response around needs of food and sustenance. Because I was so strong and so tight and so anxious, I actually couldn't be touched. The anxiety made touch uncomfortable. And so the thing that my body innately needed, I couldn't receive. This might be an experience that is similar to you. It might be far away and you might be like, oh my God, that is unfortunate. It was unfortunate. And anyway, it's something that happens within the scarcity of worthiness. And then the last aspect that we'll talk about as far as colonized power is gatekeeping. Gatekeeping and the wound of belonging. If you do not belong within certain dominant groups, You are deemed unworthiness to receive resources. I've said this 1,050 times in the podcast. I'm going to keep saying it, I guess. And so this gatekeeping, there's only power in these particular areas. You can only get power from these sectors if you are deemed worthy by all of these different performative mechanisms. It creates urgency within our system because we are wired to get our needs met. It creates urgency. Fixing of self, maybe fixing of others, maybe fixing of institution, fixing of results. It feels like seeking, like grasping. It's urgent, it's fast. It is typically dysregulated and not within a realm that feels safe. Energy is fast, it's chaotic. There's fear there because if there's a scarcity of resources, will I get met? Will my needs get met? And even the parts of our needs that we've numbed and turned off, we still feel that. We might continue to numb so that we're not cognitively feeling it, but it's a sensation that's within our body. And over time, we might become small and graspy, and stagnant and stuck. There might be patterns of perfectionism, confusion. We might feel drained and burnt out. These are the imprints, these are the responses and symptoms of not feeling met. And that come from domination, scarcity, lack of belonging. And I'm here to say these don't have to be your truth. You are worthy of feeling regulated, of feeling resourced, of feeling pleasure. The sources for power, of resources for pleasure are all around you. And the invitation might be to notice if your body has a blueprint of knowing and a blueprint of connecting to those resources. It might be perceptible, it might not be perceptible. Both are okay. This is just information. I am of the firm belief that you do have a blueprint. And when you are safe enough, supported enough, the blueprint will emerge. I'm in that belief because it's literally the work that I do. I see it every single day. It's beautiful stuff. And so the invitation might be to go from searching who, what will deem me worthy of receiving resources, and how can I curate myself into this performance of showing that I am worthy. You might go from that to trusting authentic power, trusting that who you are and how you are innately and fully and expressively is worthy of being deeply, abundantly, and powerfully met for your life's most pleasurable experience. I put imprint first because, in all honesty, it's most familiar for many of us. Now we go to innate worthiness, and I'm going to acknowledge it. When I was early in my journey, I was like, innate worthiness? Not a thing. I profoundly did not believe it. Unfortunately, I did not start with body work. I did not start with understanding the concept of a blueprint. I started in mindset work, and my mind had no concept of innate worthiness, no concept of it all. Thank God I have done body work and I can feel it. I'm very grateful for that. And so innate worthiness of abundance, of interconnectedness, of consensual power with. This is authentic power. Consensual power with. Authentic power is access from within ourselves, from our inner being, our spirit, and it's resourced from the greater than us that our self is connected to, that flows through all aspects of who we are. Interconnectedness to others, other human beings, other aspects of nature, in right relationship, the distance that feels safe, pleasurable, and consensual for all parties involved. And it's the give and take of energy. We give and tend to and care for from a well of abundance, and then we receive, are given to, are taken care of. It's an ebb and flow, a lean in and a lean out, an ebb and flow of energetic reciprocity, of physical, mental, emotional sustenance, consensual power with. I believe this is our right. I believe that this is something that we are innately worthy of. Authentic power is also rooted in abundance. This authentic power is unbreakable. We might disconnect from it, but it's still there. Maybe play with the idea that that might be possible. That even no matter how blocked, no matter how diverted from us, no matter how under-resourced, it is there and unbreakable. Blocks, not broken. And this is our co-creative power. This is what we will utilize to create our most intimate and soul level desires. And so you might notice when we're talking co-creative power, you might notice the different energies that are constantly all around us. The different energies that different humans embody, different types of love, different types of care, different types of nurturing, different types of protection. Protection that is big, protection that is discerning, protection that is nuanced. Love that is romantic, friendly, motherly, or from a child. Play that has all different types of energy in it. These are all things that are moving within a flow of abundance, and the different types of energy within nature. The compassion that some animals have, the compassion that some deities have, the protection that some deities and some animals have. It's all of these different characteristics of energy, of power that can flow to us and out of us. And it's in abundance. If and when, no, it is always in abundance. We are able to access it if and when we remember our ability to and allow ourselves to utilize that ability. That is literally what bodywork is about. Remembering our ability to be with these energies and allowing ourselves to utilize that ability. This is something that can be taught. Because we're born with the blueprint. We're born with knowing how to do it. And then along the line, we are taught different ways of being. So we can be retaught to play and manage with this flow. And so when we are playing and managing the flow, this is our co-creative power. This is what flows through our vessel and out, flows into our vessel and back out. I imagine it as like a figure eight loop. You might imagine it something else. You might imagine it, and I also imagine it and experience it coming up and through the central channel, what you might know as your chakras, this line in the center of your body. And this is what we'll utilize to create our most intimate and our soul level desires. Remembering that we are innately worthy of the flow. And so this brings me back to perception. When we're using our co-creative power and letting our power flow out and into, we come back to perception. This is a different perception though. This isn't the perception from the point of being perceived as worthy or unworthy of receiving. This is a perception of I have let power flow out of me into a container that I have created, and I'm allowing others to meet my power, to see and be with and view my power and potentially view the thing that I've created. And the more we allow others to see the co-created power that we might have contained in a course, in a writing, in a poem, in a book, in a piece of art, in our facilitation, that's where perception comes back in line, and we allow them to perceive the fullness of our power, as much power as we've been able to co-create and hold at that point in time, knowing it will definitely grow. And at that point, that is when we do land back in expression of intentionally creating and intentionally offering our power in exchange for the intentional co-creative power of somebody else. This is the dance back and forth. So we see this again in romantic relationships, but it's not based on thinness. It's not based on desirability. It's based on attractiveness of who we are. Attractiveness of our power flowing through our personality. Our power flowing through our love and the things that we do are acts of care because we desire to give acts of care, not because we are trying to be viewed as desirable, but because we are holding desirability within us and operate from the desire to co-create and give and please because it feels good for us too. So we might see this in our relationships. We might see this in our work. We might see this in, and honestly, I'm not sure what else is outside of relationships and work. That feels like all I experience. We might see this in the way that we treat ourselves, the way that we treat our bodies. When we are in our authentic power and our innate worthiness, we perceive ourselves as worthy of love. We perceive ourselves as worthy of sustenance that is both pleasurable and nourishing, and different balances of each. Noticing and naming that food that might be intensely pleasurable might have less vitamins and nutrients and minerals, but might be nourishing a different part of our experience. And we are worthy of that. We are also worthy of being able to sense our desire to experience food that is deeply nourishing as far as nutrients goes. It gets to be a balance. It gets to be a play so that our physical body feels cared for, so that our physical body has the power that it needs to allow a flow and to co-create containers of value, containers of power, containers of the embodiment and the snapshot frozen in time expression of our power to be co-created with, to be experienced. So this perception is not the perception based on stereotypes, based on perception of intelligence with all of these different rules. It's perception from multisensory. Can it be felt? Can it be sensed at the heart level, the hips, the solar plexus, the womb, the throat? Can our mind perceive it and play with it? Can our nervous systems interact with it? This is different power. It's not gatekept, but it is intentionally contained and offered, accessible, without aspects of unworthiness or worthiness, without some odd stereotype of deeming humans okay or not okay, for lack of a better phrase. So that's big. That's a lot to digest. You might play with this idea. Of colonized power versus authentic power. You might play with the idea that you have authentic power. You might play with the idea that power might be able to be sourced from the divine with co-creative consensuality. It might be able to be sourced from nature. Might be able to be sourced from land, and lineage from the divine, those might also be sources of power that do not have a human with oppressive beliefs gatekeeping that power. And you might play with the idea of what would that look like for me, the possibility of it. And if that is something that you're interested in playing with the idea and maybe experiencing practices around that idea, you might be interested in my group course, Thriving Foundations. We will be playing with the idea first of stability and using our bodies and our nervous system in order to access co-creative power so that we feel resourced, so that we feel taken care of, so that we feel like our needs are met and we can create abundance. And then we will tune into boundaries, practices of body work and mindset and conversation around boundaries. How do we get to be protected? How do we get to be focused in co-creating what we desire to co-create? What distractions do we get to gently push away? What drains do we get to gently close and lovingly close and powerfully, protectively closed? What spaciousness, what distance do we get to create based on our body's knowing of need, based on our love for self and our love for others? It'll be a 12-week program. There will be new practices and modules every single week for those 12 weeks. And there'll be a group aspect of it. There'll be 60 to 90 minutes where each individual will be coached. So it's very small, very intimate container, maximum 6 people. Everyone will have a time to be coached on how are those practices going, what is showing up that needs care, that these practices get to nurture and deepen into the embodiment of who you are. So it's a place to be facilitated and experience your body at a deeper, more connected level, experience your body's ability to do magnificent things, and also be witnessed, celebrated, nurtured, and cared for in the process of remembering your power, remembering your innate worthiness to be met, remembering your innate worthiness to give, and remembering your innate worthiness to have right relationship, distance, and boundaries so that you can create and express and give what you desire to give to the world. Because it is imperative we are well resourced spiritually, physically, and emotionally in order to do the big, big things that I know that we are all meant to do and experience and be while we're here. So if that is interest to you, head over to my website, SelenaCole.com, Thriving Foundations group program. So that'll start first week of April, maybe second week of April. We'll play with it. In the interim, come to Turn On Possibilities, the spring equinox, and new moon 3-day witch ritual. It will be so rich, so delicious, and so powerful. Like the clarity, I've actually been doing the ritual myself. The clarity that you will receive in this, beautiful, potent, and palpable. I am looking forward to seeing you in all of the places. If this was helpful to you, you might share it on the socials or in text message. If you do share it, I would love to know. Tag me in it. Maybe you send me a DM and let me know what golden nuggets were really, really powerful for you, or maybe what you didn't like. Your choice. Open to feedback. That's consensual and benevolent. So anyways, I'm looking forward to talking to you soon. I hope you enjoy this. I hope that it was helpful, and enjoy the rest of your day, remembering your power.